Mergers of public sector banks. This is the issue which we'll analyze briefly today. Before we look into the implications of these mergers, social and economic, and how it will unfold and gradually affect the Indian economy, let us briefly look at history of mergers in India. As you remember, most of you, that in 1991, Government of India had adopted a new economic policy through which a program of economic reforms had been started, and 4 kinds of reforms were initiated in 91. One of the 4 was financial reforms. The other 3, namely industrial reforms, fiscal reforms and trade reform processes were also started. To guide the government as to how to move on in the direction of financial reforms, a committee was set up by the RBI under Mr. M. Narasimham, so popularly called Banking Reforms Committee, but officially it was called Financial Reforms Committee, Committee on Financial Reforms. 91 onwards, there has been the process of institutional changes, institutional adjustments, including mergers and amalgamations. We can look at the mergers broadly into 2 parts: before 2014 and after 2014. Starting in 91, the first merger we saw in 1993. Before that, we had public sector banks divided into 2 groups. Some banks were non-nationalized and others were called nationalized banks. As you know, in 69, 14 banks were nationalized. In 1980, 6 more banks were nationalized. So, number of nationalized banks in 91 was 20, and here there was SBI Group, 1 SBI and 7 associate banks. So, 8 here and 20 there. We had 28 public sector banks in 1991. But in 93, one of these 20 banks, namely the New Bank of India, was found involved, that is the higher officials were found involved in a scam led by Mr. Harshad Mehta, share market scam. So, this New Bank of India was merged to the PNB, Punjab National Bank. So, number of nationalized banks got reduced to 19 in 1993, and this number remained 8. So, 19 plus 8, this was the number in 93, 27. Later on, in 2004, some reforms were introduced in the IDBI Bank, which was set up in 1994 as a private sector bank, but IDBI, which was the parent body holding company, was merged to the IDBI Bank in 2004. In the new entity, government shareholding was more than 50%, so it was reclassified as a public sector banks. So, with the inclusion of IDBI Bank, the number increased to 28. But in 2006, one of the associate banks, namely State Bank of Saurashtra, was merged to the SBI. So, this number reduced to 7 in 2006-7, and that number was 19 plus 1. So, 7 plus 1 IDBI plus 19 nationalized banks. So, this was again 27. In 2009-10, another associate bank of SBI, namely the State Bank of Indore, was merged to the SBI. So, this number further reduced to 6 plus 1 IDBI Bank plus 19 nationalized banks. So, this number was 26. In 2013, Drishti Mahila Bank was also added. So, again this number increased to 27 with addition of Rashtriya Mahila Bank, 20, 26 plus RMB 27. So, this is the number of public sector banks which the present government inherited from the previous government. After 2014, some more mergers were announced. As you know, in 2017, the remaining 5 associate banks, this number includes 1 SBI and 5 associate banks. The remaining associate banks 5 were merged to SBI. So, again this number after merger reduced to 1, only SBI. This RMB was also merged to the SBI. So, this number reduced from 27 to 21, 1 SBI and 1 IDBI and 19 nationalized banks. So, this was the number in 2017-21. This year on 1st April 2019, Dena Bank and the Vijaya Bank were merged to the Bank of Baroda. So, this number remained 1, this IDBI 1, but this number got reduced to 17. So, the total number reduced to 19. On 1st January itself, 2019, one incident took place that LIC, the Life Insurance Corporation of India, acquired more than 51% shares of IDBI Bank. And so, thereafter, RBI reclassified IDBI Bank as a private sector bank. So, this number got reduced to 0. It was transferred into the private sector category. So, this number again reduced to 18. Actually, this reduced first and this reduced later. Now, after the present announcement on 30th of August, then comes this new announcement on 30th of August 2019 that out of 18 banks, merger process would start for 10 banks, and the 10 banks would be merged in such a manner that the number would reduce to 4. Remaining 8 would be there. So, you can divide this 18 into 2 parts, 10 banks which are going to under the process of merger, and remaining 8 banks, the decision has not been taken about it. After merger, the number will reduce to 4, so 4 plus this 8. Hopefully, on 1st of April 2020, after the process of merger was done, completed, the number of public sector banks are reduced to 12. This is the process through which it has been happening. So, you can't say or nobody can believe it that this is a new measure. Of course, it is new in the sense that it is being applied in the process of these 10 banks, but the process of mergers and amalgamations have been carried on for quite some time. Even before 91, many banks were merged to other banks. This merger process also takes place among private sector banks. Just for the record, you know that ICICI was set up in 1955 as a development finance institution. They procured a license in 93 from the RBI to set up a commercial bank. So, ICICI Bank was set up in 94 as a separate entity from the ICICI, that is a holding company. But after few years, in 2002, the parent body ICICI was merged to the ICICI Bank. So, that number reduced again to 1 among private sector banks. IDBI was also set up in 1964 as a development finance institution, and that institution had also applied for license to the RBI, and they had also procured a license in 93 to set up a commercial bank. So, IDBI Bank was set up in 1994 as a separate entity from the IDBI Bank, the holding company. In 2004, IDBI, the parent body, was merged to the IDBI Bank. This kind of merger is called reverse merger, if a parent body is merged to the subsidiary. So, it has happened earlier also. Now, the process is that which banks are going through this merger process now? If we look at them, the biggest among them would be PNB. Two banks are going to merge to the PNB. One is Oriental Bank of Commerce and another is United Bank of India. Then there would be Union Bank, in which Andhra Bank would be merged, and also Corporation Bank. Then the third is Canara Bank Syndicate Bank is going to be merged. And fourth is Indian Bank, in which Allahabad Bank would be merged. These mergers are being debated, some controversies are also there. If you look at the profile of these banks, after the merger, the business turnover of PNB plus 2 would grow to roughly 18 lakh crores, 17.94 to be more precise, combined turnover. After merger, Union Bank and the two other banks would have a combined turnover of 14.6 lakh crores. Canara Bank and Syndicate Bank would have 15.20 or 15.2 lakh crores. An Indian Bank and Allahabad Bank would have roughly 8.08 lakh crores. If we also add the other 8 banks for which there is no process of merger going on, the combined turnover of all the 12 public sector banks is likely to cross 100 lakh crores. It will be around 113 lakh crores. And with that kind of turnover, it will have 70% share in the entire banking business in India. So, public sector banks, even after this merger, would dominate the banking scenario. They will continue to mobilize the largest amount of funds from the depositors. They will continue to disburse largest amount of loan to various groups of borrowers, and they will contribute to dominate the entire capital formation process of India and investment level of India. This merger would make them stronger in the sense that it will consolidate their brand image, it will consolidate their human resource power, it will reduce their cost, and it will make them more competitive in this globalizing economy. So, for the Indian economy, it is a good news. Though the share market has not responded very favorably after this merger was announced, share market opened on Tuesday, that is on 3rd September, and there was a sharp decline in the share price of many of these banks, even private sector banks experienced. But there could be different reasons for that. There could be global environment for this trend. Workers of these public sector banks are also not very happy about these merger processes. Overall, in these 10 banks, some 3 lakh workers are working. They have more than 13,000, rather more than 37,000 branches in India, 37,000 roughly 500, 472 to be more precise. After this merger, of course, there would be many duplication of branches in specific location. There could be branches in the same building. If there is a multi-layer building, and there on one floor maybe PNB, another floor YBC, or maybe on the same floor. So, after this merger, some of the rationalization process would be undertaken by the banks for their branches. If this happens, there would be some surplus pool of workers emerging there. Finance Minister has assured that there will be no worker will be laid off, no worker will be retrenched. But if let us say after some branches are opened, what we will do with the workers? Maybe we will take them into the branch which is operating for some time, maybe their efficiency, that is capacity would be enhanced, the branch capacity would be enhanced. But the truth and apprehension remains that as the people retire from banks and positions get vacated, maybe fresh recruitments would not be done as much as it was done earlier or without merger. So, job growth rate within banking sector may be adversely affected. Existing workers are also protesting against mergers, maybe because once the worker of Andhra Bank, that is after merger of Andhra Bank to Union Bank, the workers may be transferred in far away locations. They are more comfortable in the locality, they are residing there for quite a long time. So, all these banks would have a pan-Indian presence and pan-Indian operational image. So, workers may be protesting also because they could be transferred from one location to a very far away location, let us say from Andhra Pradesh to, they could be transferred to Manipur. This happens, this is a kind of inertia, that could be reason, but there could be other reasons. There could be a real threat for more chances of VRS being offered to bank workers. So, these points are also should be taken into a consideration. If you look at the ranking of these banks on the basis of their business turnover after the process of the merger is complete next year, SBI would become, or it rather remain, the biggest public sector bank, first largest. PNB, OBC and United Bank of India would become, it is PNB plus, would be second largest. Bank of Baroda, which was the Dena Bank, Vijaya Bank were merged recently. Bank of Baroda plus Vijaya and Dena would be third largest. Canara Bank plus Syndicate Bank would be fourth largest. Union Bank, Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank, that is Union Bank plus, would be fifth largest. Bank of India, which is not going through the process of merger, would be sixth largest. Indian Bank plus Allahabad Bank, that is Indian Bank plus, would be seventh largest. Central Bank, which is not going through the process of merger, would be eighth largest. Indian Overseas Bank would be, which is not going through the process of merger either, would be ninth largest. Then we have UCO Bank, United Commercial Bank, which is not going through the process of merger either, 10th largest bank. Bank of Maharashtra, would be 11th largest, and Punjab and Sindh Bank would be 12th largest, that is the smallest. There is a huge difference between the annual business turnover. This is a ranking on the basis of their business turnover annual. SBI's annual business turnover is more than 50 lakh crores, 52 lakh crores, while the annual turnover of Punjab and Sindh Bank is only 1.7 lakh crores. There is a big difference between the topper and second topper, that is the first and second ranker. Their annual turnover is only roughly less than 18 lakh crores, 17.94 lakh crores. All of them combined together would have roughly 138 lakh crores of business turnover, and as I said earlier, they will have 70% share in banking business. Number of workers would also be big. Government has said that some technological innovation process can be fastened if we have less number of banks. If you recall, Narsimham Committee 1 and 2, 1 came in 91, 2 came in 98, they had also recommended that rather than having a large number of small and medium and large size banks, we should have few banks having a strength to operate at international level. That means they can finance foreign trade, import-export activities, they can cater to the needs of the foreign branches of Indian companies, then cater also to the needs of the workers who are going and working outside India. International level banks, the committee says there should be 4 big international level banks. Below that there should be national level banks which will have pan-India presence, and below that there should be regional banks or zonal level banks, and at the bottom in the pyramid there should be local banks. So this consolidation process of merger process may be viewed in the light of those recommendations, and the process is going on for more than 2 decades, more than 25 years, and this is a new step. So it is termed by the government as a big bang reforms. It is also considered as a part of second generation economic reform which started in 96 and is still going on for quite a long time. Second generation reform was quite stuck up in between 96 to 99, it was not moving. Again during 2009 to 14 there was no movement in the process of reforms. So 2014 onwards, government is working hard or pressing hard to reform the institutions. Some reform measures are of course controversial, like demonetization. GST is also having some controversy because the process is said to be hastily implemented and so many amendments have been introduced in between. This bank merger also, some critics say that it is an announcement out of nervousness, because after 5th July when the budget was presented, the share market was going down and down, foreign portfolio investors were withdrawing their money, and so rupee was weakening more and more. So under this process, GDP growth data was also down from 5.8% in the last quarter of last year to 5% GDP growth rate in the first quarter of the present year. All these adverse newses made the government a little nervous, and so the government announced these measures in haste without consulting the board of directors of these banks, which is not a very business-like behavior. There are 3-4 major criticisms. If you want to write in examination, you can write. One, of course, is that the government should have taken a feedback from the board of directors of each bank, how they think about it, how they will go about this merger process. So it is a unilateral decision and announcement by the government without consulting the affected entities owned by the government. Second is that it may adversely affect job growth rate within banking sector. That is true. That apprehension is very realistic, though the finance minister has assured that there would be no loss of jobs. That is also true. They will not retrench immediately anybody, but fresh recruitments would be lower and lower. The third is that this is not the right time of reforms when the economy is not performing well. But this criticism can be countered on the point that crisis is the right time to introduce reform, because in the period of crisis, people are ready to bring about and accept change. If things are going very nicely, if things are progressing, then people don't feel to disturb the momentum by bringing about a change. Government has been announcing and rather pronouncing a phrase very frequently which has come from corporate sector, disruptive policy. This cannot be termed as a disruptive policy, this is a kind of continuity in the policy, and some people also saying that this is a kind of disruptive policy. That can be countered that this is just continuation of the old policies of reforms, and there is also apprehension of some regional level. Some people from Andhra Pradesh have requested that please don't dilute the name of Andhra Bank because it is a kind of gives them a sense of identity, people of Andhra Pradesh. It happens earlier also, when the State Bank of Saurashtra was being merged to the SBI in 2006-07, people from Saurashtra region were also making this kind of argument, but that don't dilute the name Saurashtra, which is they are associated with a bank. People of Indore also had requested that don't dilute the name of Indore in State Bank of Indore when it was being merged to the State Bank of India in 2009-10. Some people are also saying that though Bank of Maharashtra is much smaller than these banks, this is not being merged because in near future there is an election in Maharashtra, and this merger of Bank of Maharashtra may disturb some voters. Punjab and Sindh Bank is so small, it is not being merged to any other bank because maybe the associated party of the present government is not very happy about it. So, some of these controversies are of a political nature, some of from workers' point of view. Investment community is by and large happy, but that happiness is not reflected in share market behavior. But overall, in conclusion, we can say that this is a good step in the direction of institutional reforms, and it should strengthen the undercurrents of Indian economy, the structure of Indian economy, which may reflect with a little time gap and maybe after 6 months or 1 year. That's it. Thank you.